So at this stage, I think we're almost done. And what I like to do usually when I wrap up a piece is to really push the volume even more with some shadows and highlights. And that's really, I think, the fun part because it just makes the objects a lot more pronounced all of a sudden. So what I'm going to do first is to add another layer called Women Shadow on top of the Women layer. And I like to create clipping mask. What that means is, see how that little arrow? It means that now it's attached to this folder. So whatever I draw, it only appear in the area where the base layer is. So what the layer that's being contained in this folder. So if I release the clipping mask, you can tell I'm just like drawing it everywhere. So it means that the effects I'm doing, whatever, is only applying to this layer and no other pixels in the background. So that comes in really handy when doing shadow because you don't need to really worry about going into the outline really clean. Let me show you what I mean. For example, I want a little bit cast shadow here, right? So with this edge, I have to be a little bit careful because it is in the same layer. The hair and the flash is grouped in the same Women layer. But once I create clipping mask, see how these parts just got ultimately cleaned up. And then what I do is select multiply. And that gives a darker shade of color by blending the blue I just pick up and the flash color of this body. Usually with a warmer light, you have a cooler shadow. So in this case, I just pick up this blue, sort of a neutral blue, and then apply it. So when you use multiply, usually the color get more intense as well. So I tend to use a more neutral color to do it. Again, this is what it looks like when it's normal. And then when it's multiplied, it looks like this with the layer clipping mask. So I'm gonna go ahead and add where I think there should be shadow, like for example, under the armpits here. I'm also gonna like attach this resources. So if you want to really understand how those blending layers work, like all of this, they all do like different things and they're especially helpful when it comes to manipulating photos. That resources is going to be very helpful, but usually the blending mode I use the most is the multiply for shadow. So for example, with this shadow, I feel like it shouldn't be this harsh when I get to the dress part. Then again, we are bringing out our very handy tool of layer mask and having that part sort of be erased. And that followed that curve a lot nicer. We can also add some shadows to the leaves to pop individual ones even better to give the illusion of an overall more voluminous tree. Same thing, multiply, for example here. And then you can see maybe this color feels a little bit too light when we're using on the tree. Then we can always go back and then adjust that as well. Bringing the value down, like around there. And then making it into normal so you can pick that up, that color we just created up. Bring it back to multiply so you can see what it looks like when it's being used as a shadow color. So we can keep going on that, but see how like this area of the leaves feels like is popping from this area, so you're just adding extra volume to that shape. And then we can also add some highlight, where highlights usually are, such as the cheekbones. Can put it in the detail folder we have here. And then with highlight, you can just pick the color that's on here and then move up to the value. Well, this is very close to white already, so there's not much more we can go from there. But you can still see. To move up the layer because it was behind the line layer. And then that feels like a little too much, so let's dial down the opacity. And the white feels like it doesn't work on the lip as a highlight. It's just too white, so let's pick a light pink color. And there we go. And if you feel like maybe the flower can use some dew, so it looks more like dewy and cute, we can do that too. At this point, it's just like, you know, adding the really final touches. Because the big part is already done. Now it's just like the cherry on top of the cake. So I think I'm done, and I think the piece is at a good place. I think you guys should also compare your final piece to the first version when you just apply the swatches from other people's palette you just stole, and then see how far you have come along and how you have made that into your own. So next step, I'm just gonna show you how you're gonna export your piece so you can share it with all your friends and families and ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends.